Follow me with your shape-shifting smiles and I see you. Maybe they'll believe you. Illuminati, occult, dawn trial, silver discs and hidden files, and we see you. We've got to believe you. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off.
Blast off on another epic episode of the Hyper Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast, also known as Hero Paranormal. My name is Ryan, the alien anthropologist of the airwaves, and I've got a guest coming on today that I've wanted to talk to for a long time. I have a gut feeling there's a lot of synchronicities and similarities when it comes to some of these high strangeness locations, whether those be in Colorado or Utah. Oftentimes, it seems to me that a lot of this stuff has similarities, whether that be with history, locations, geography, the occult, and everything else, military, it goes on and on. I could be barking up the wrong tree, but I have an idea. Katie seems to really have her pulse on this, and she's got a lot of projects going on, so I'm really happy she's going to be joining us. Before we get to it, if you haven't been to heroparanormal.com, please check it out. We've got a small eBay store there with hats, t-shirts, swag you can purchase. Anything you buy there helps support the podcast. And please, if you feel like it, smash that green subscribe button. We have a ton of content over there for members, and we also have free memberships. So without further ado, let's get to Katie, Paige. Katie, Paige, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. It's a pleasure being here.
Great to have you on. I cannot remember the first time that I heard about you, but I've been following your work, and everywhere I look, I see more Katie, Paige. Let's start off by kind of going into the new book. For those who are unfamiliar with Snippy, this was an amazing animal mutilation case, and you've done a great deal of work with it. And then we'll kind of go into the Colorado ranch and what got you into all this high strangeness, and see where the ball lands.
Okay, yeah, it's exciting. So at this year's Contact in the Desert, which is held the end of next month into the first part of June, I will be speaking about this new book, and we just yesterday got the run here. It's Snippy the Horse, A King Family Legacy by Tony Angiola and Katie Paige. And really this came about a few years back. I was approached by the King family of the San Luis Valley and started working with them and, talking to each other about what occurred in my childhood back in Elbert County at the Rocky Mountain Ranch and what was going on in the San Luis Valley. And basically that opened up this collaborative effort. But really what put this over the top was there some questions about the horse's name Snippy, and in the late 80s, Burl Lewis stated, no, it wasn't Snippy, it was Lady. And so I was asking the family about, is it Lady, is it Snippy? And as fate would have it, the long lost APRO files, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, David Marler out of Rio Rancho, New Mexico, in his National UFO Historical Record Center, acquired the long lost APRO files, and he also has an ICAP, and they did some work on Snippy as well. And this is a treasure trove. So I'm only a quick 6 hours down to Rio Rancho, so you can better believe I was down there, and I was actually there looking for more documents and photographs because APRO took a lot of photographs. So there's boxes upon boxes upon boxes of photographs. I'm like, there has to be stuff from the ranch in my childhood. And Dave plops down all the Snippy stuff. And they were never seen photographs. And the first photograph that I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we have this photograph now. And it's a newborn Snippy, 1 day old, with his mother Lady. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. So I'm on the phone with Carrie King and Tony. And long story short, it's been, 5.5 months of going through a deep dive of all the old case records and documents and photographs and recordings. We have recordings of Nellie Lewis. So in 1967, Nellie Lewis had a horse, a 3-year-old gelding male. That was the first kind of worldwide recognized animal mutilation. So, and it's been a deep dive on this ever since.
And this was a really big deal. I remember speaking with Chris O'Brien about Snippy, and it was a really big deal. The way that this horse passed was anything but normal. And is the book available in all regular like Amazon, or where's the best place to buy the book, Katie?
The best place will be on. I'm going to try and get it released on Amazon on my birthday, which is May 20th. So in a few more weeks, you'll be able to find it on Amazon. And speaking of Chris O'Brien, we lost a true friend and such a great researcher, and he lived out in the valley for a number of years. Matter of fact, this last weekend we were down at the Snippy site with the King family, and we went and kind of sought out the old neighborhood Chris lived in and stuff. And hey Chris, and I was so bummed that we lost him too soon, because I was really looking forward to working with him on this and collaborating with him. But unfortunately, fate had something else planned. But anyway, he did a lot of work in the valley, and Linda Moulton Howe as well. And she's such a treasure trove. And with Linda Moulton Howe, she kind of started out there at the ranch in my childhood in Elbert County as an investigative journalist. And it was, no fault to Linda's at all, and we talked about this at length on the phone, but when she interviewed Burl Lewis back in the 80s, he's the one who kind of started this whole misinformation about the name Lady. And so, Linda and I talked it out, and she actually wrote a really nice letter for the foreword of this book. And we kind of gathered that after the tragic death of Nellie Lewis in 1976, and unfortunately she committed suicide the day of her mother's funeral, Burl Lewis married not too long after to a woman named Barbara, worked at the country club, in the San Luis Valley, and we feel like he may have kind of did this misinformation campaign to try and make all of this go away, and really it had the opposite effect. But we really don't know the motivations on why Burl kind of made up things that weren't necessarily true, when we now have all the photographic evidence and documents that state otherwise. So it's kind of a mystery. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, so we can't ask him, like, why did you do this? But Linda's been great, and she's really happy that we have found and uncovered all these things as well.
Yeah, Linda is great. And I remember the first time I spoke to Linda on the phone, I was just like, giddy. Like, you would swear I felt like I was talking to Michael Jackson or some like superstar, because she really has done a ton of work at this stuff. And for anybody that hasn't seen, she's got some great films out there, Strange Harvest, a number of other good stuff. And oh, cool! Yeah, there it is.
A little package for me, yeah, but.
Oh,
it's
that's
awesome. It's a good film, and yeah, she is like the leading authority on animal mutilations, that's for sure. And Chuck Zukowski, he did a lot of work with animal mutilations as well. And for me, because being on, a Skinwalker Ranch is sort of like a trifecta of all sorts of different types of activity you can imagine, from cryptids to UFOs to paranormal and on and on. And the animal mutilations I kind of avoided for a long time, because I'm like, what? There's other great researchers that have a handle on this, and I just didn't want to go down that road. But there's no way to research Rocky Mountain Ranch without looking at animal mutilations. So it sort of found its way to me nonetheless, whether I wanted it or not.
Yeah, that's a lot of times that's how these things work out. You just kind of find yourself there, right? Like in the middle of it. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about Rocky Mountain Ranch, your experiences there, and what kind of led you down this path.
Yeah, I always have to remember not everybody, because when you tell a story over and over, I'll try not to rush through it. But, back in the mid-'70s, my mom worked for United Airlines as a key punch operator, and she met a gentleman that she started dating who was actually married and was going to get divorced and separated. It's a long 70s story. But he owned a ranch in Elbert County. I know. It's like, so I did not live on this ranch full time. For 3 years, my mom's boyfriend, he had 3 sons. The 2 younger sons went to a larger school district in Colorado, the Cherry Creek School District. So they lived with us during the week. And on weekends, we would drive back and forth to the ranch house. And so this went on for 3 years. I'm 9, 10, and 11 years old. My big sister is 6 years older, and then my mom. But I'm telling you, for years, I compartmentalized like this hitchhiker effect. So I was experiencing things at my home 45 minutes away from the ranch when I'm young, shadow figures and paranormal things in the house, kids making, your house is haunted, that kind of stuff. But the adults in the situation, Jack and my mom and all of them, kind of threatened and warned us not to talk about what was happening out there. And I never really understood why. So for me and my sister, this was kind of like this big secret that we kept to each other. I never knew anybody knew anything about it. I did not know about Linda Howe. I didn't know it was ever investigated until I bought this book right here, Hunt for the Skinwalker. And I just bought the book. This was before Skinwalker Ranch was really a big thing, right, when this first came out. And I just thought, a ranch, maybe you would have some similarities to what I went through in my childhood. And I opened the chapter called Other Hot Spots and started reading about a ranch in Colorado. And I knew because of the strange family dynamics, it was known as Clearview Ranch back in UFO folklore. I'm like, this has to be the ranch in my childhood. So I quickly wrote Dr. Leo Sprinkle an old school letter explaining who I was. Here's the real names, here's the real town, blah, blah, blah. And I got a letter back in the mail. Yep, this is it. And, for me, Laramie's 3 hours away. So I was quickly at the archives pulling up all the information on the ranch. And then John Schuessler, who's one of the founding fathers of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, quickly bestowed upon me the original briefing document from the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And this is how, like, that disembodied electrical voice that we heard and all that stuff, it's written in here. And I mean, me and my sister remember it because it was terrifying when it happened. And since this time of gathering all these documents and facts and doing the interviews, it's just been a deep dive of just one thing after another after another. And one thing I'd like to explain to your listeners is this wasn't just on the 60-acre ranch. It's a lot like the Uinta Basin, where we have the Palmer Divide in Elbert County. It's like this whole area of Elbert County, from Simla to Rama to Franktown and on down Elizabeth. They all have high strangeness activity, and the more people I interview from this area, the more I'm like, oh yeah, something's with this area, not just the ranch.
Big time. Yeah. And that's fascinating. That putting that together, kind of connecting the dots and realizing that that's the same place.
Yeah.
And it is, it's a ranch I've heard about since the first time I think I heard about it was like in 2005.
So you knew before me.
I was shocked to hear about, like this other Skinwalker ranch. And it was fascinating because it was very hush hush. And, people kind of knew where it was, but not exactly. Mm-hmm. And the story that you mentioned of the electronic disembodied voice, that's one of my favorites. Can we tell listeners a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so it was the boys' mother's birthday, and like I said, she was dating this mysterious guy, and the more I'm digging into this, the more mysterious this gets, because one of the questions I've always had was how much of this is military black access projects, how much of this is actual paranormal stuff that we can't explain. And where I'm at right now, just to save, till the end, I know, but I'm thinking it's both. Both things are going on at the same time. Then the question became, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the military presence cause some of this, or did it predate that? And then going to the archives and doing a deep dive on the history of the land, from my childhood, it was known as the Old Baker Ranch, and it was also known as the whole Mulligan Homestead. And I started researching the Mulligans, and there's an old Irishman by the name of Dick Mulligan who was born and raised on the ranch property of my childhood. And in there, later in his years, he became the caretaker for Winter Park Ski Resort. And it said Dick Mulligan had the reputation of bold exaggeration and the gift of gab and storytelling. And I'm thinking, okay, no. This guy's probably trying to tell people what's going on this property decades and decades ago, from the late 1800s into the and they're like, oh, Dick, you're so full of it. Anyway, so I think the activity predates, the military presence. So that mystery is kind of solved for me. And even doing interviews with some of the locals, they predated the military presence there. So it's my opinion that happened. But the night of that scary night, it was a boys' mother's birthday. And then we'll get into the mom's boyfriend, who's mysterious and comes from San Francisco and says he's with the, Air Defense Command. He's a mysterious guy. But anyway, so we're all there. The adults are in the front room celebrating. It was me and my sister and the 3 boys in the boys' bedroom back in the ranch house, and just doing what we do, hanging out, whatever. And all of a sudden, the very first thing reported on the ranch was a strange low hum sound. A lot like what you hear in Taos, New Mexico, the Taos hum. So anytime this hum would start up, weird stuff would happen. So that's the first thing that we remember is the hum. And when you hear that, everybody's like, okay, something's going to happen. Right when that happens, the power in the house goes out. And to me, it was the brightest light I'd ever seen in the boys' bedroom window. It was like like sunshine coming in, but there was no sound. It wasn't a helicopter. It wasn't anything like that. At that very moment, it was like out of every orifice in the house, this disembodied electrical voice is the only way I can describe it. And I didn't talk about this for years because it sounds absolutely crazy, but it basically says, attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends, meaning us, will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And I'll tell you, when my sister first heard that back, because I made a recreation of how I remember it sounding, it was like a PTSD moment for my sister too. I mean, it was terrifying. And so I just remember me and my mom, my sister, getting in our car, driving back to our house. And when I walked in the front door from that night, I fell to the ground, I couldn't speak, and I got my full tunnel vision, migraine headaches, the whole 9 yards from that night on, like really bad. In researching now as an adult and as an investigator, I learned about plasma ball technology. And I'm wondering if whoever was out there experimenting with plasma ball technology, which is where they can shoot laser out and pipe out human sounding voices. And it does sound very electronic if you listen back to it. So, that's just a thought I had.
Yeah, no, super, super traumatic. And I think, as you know, I own a property. It's roughly half the size of the ranch that you were staying on, that shares a fence line with Skinwalker Ranch.
Okay.
And both in and around that area, because with these things, it's usually like the area, right? Like you said, like the San Luis Valley. Once you've heard a disembodied voice, and we've heard 1 or 2 that were kind of tinny and metallic sounding, kind of electronic, but you heard it inside the house. Is that correct?
I do, and I do remember, the one thing I do remember very clearly, and my sister remembers too, I just remember the adults like being like panicking. I remember them in the dark, like with flashlights and stuff, like looking at old stereo equipment and speakers and trying to figure out like that. I do have that memory of that. I don't remember getting home though. Like I don't remember the drive home. I remember getting to the house and having that medical episode, which maybe lasted, 5 minutes on the floor. And then my mom and my sister took me up to my bedroom and, you have the whole tunnel vision and that whole thing. So I remember that. But yeah, it was a really scary night. And I can tell you for sure, I never went back to that ranch house at night again. So anytime we would visit, it would be during the day. And that's, one of those daytime visits on the weekend is when me and my sister, Colorado Spring Day, and it's on Beyond Skinwalker where we're flipping the Frisbee and we look down and there's this dry dirt under our feet and it's a large circle, yet there was wet, heavy snow outside the circle. And that was just stuck in our minds. It was just bizarre. And come to find out in the report, there were 2 of those on the ranch property. One at now they call the landing site where the dog won't go and all that stuff, and where the rocket kind of freaked out and landed. But it is reported in the initial reports that it was 75 feet in diameter. And what's interesting about that, when we're re-examining the Snippy case out in the San Luis Valley, there's so many commonalities. Even the hum sounds were out in the valley. And the 75-foot large circle was right around the location of Snippy's mutilation. And in Snippy's case, there was not only the 75-foot in diameter circle there were also 5 15-foot circles around that circle. There were impressions in the ground that were 2 inches by 4 inches deep that were compared to the Lonnie Zamora site. Now, they didn't really match, they weren't exact, but it's really cool that they worked with Lonnie Zamora on the Snippy case, and there's photographs in the book that show Lonnie Zamora and Don Richmond working on that together. They had box encounters. That's a whole other weird thing, are these strange box encounters. There's a military presence out there in the valley, balls of light, so many commonalities to Elbert County in the San Luis Valley. So for me, that's been the coolest thing to come out of this project here.
Yeah, and this box encounter thing is really interesting too. But I mean, this is the one and only case I've heard of that disembodied robotic voice inside of a residence, inside of a structure. That's horrific. It must have just reverberated and echoed. And the boxes are really fascinating too, because NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, did a lot of investigation into some of what they called chupas in South America and Central America. And these boxes are oftentimes right around these mutilations, aren't they?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something I'm kind of piecing together, in these last few months. I'm a little behind the 8 ball here. You don't know where to focus. But I want to say something. Paul Sinclair, do you know Paul Sinclair out of the UK? Wolflands, he did Wolflands. He also has heard that disembodied electrical voice while out investigating in the middle of nowhere. And from talking with him, it sounds very similar. And now, if that's the case, that makes me rethink the plasma ball theory. I think there's something in me that wants to believe this is all just us humans doing something and it's nothing else, So I'd rather it be us than something else. But yeah, Paul Sinclair has heard that disembodied electrical voice as well. But the boxes, and they're different sizes and different shapes. Something that is really interesting, in 1974, there's the famous Carl Higdon case out of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. So, I have a YouTube channel, Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige on YouTube, and I try to go on location. And in one of the episodes that I put out, we went to Medicine Bow to the Carl Higdon case. And we also have his archives at the University of Wyoming's Heritage Center, which I thought they just had Dr. Leo Sprinkle's UFO records there, but they don't. This is in Laramie, Wyoming. They have Richard Haynes, who is a very famous researcher on pilot sightings, and his is so well organized. That's a whole other thing we can talk about, the November 11th, 1975 date. But and going through the archives there, they had the original Carl Higdon. And Carl Higdon, there's a lot of photographic evidence and things like that. And in there, there was a box with his encounter and an elk connection. I also think there's an elk connection to some of these things. And in Carl Higdon's case, they actually have photographs of where you can see this box type thing landed and burnt the grass. And so in my research, I've noticed that, yes, they seem to be around mutilations and cryptids. I had a box encounter in the daytime. I don't know if it was a man-made box or some other strange thing. There is a box encounter in Snippy in the San Luis Valley. And, of course, Trey Hudson's down south. He had, the Fleur image where his investigators disappear into this large box top type structure. So, yeah, these are very interesting things, and I'm not really sure what their purposes are. Although I did have a woman come up to me after a conference one year, and she suggested, in talking to ranchers that have lost their cattle, one of the ranchers told me that in the pastures where the mutilations are being done, the cattle seem to be huddled together and calm, and in adjoining pastures, they're all freaked out. And somebody suggested to me that perhaps these boxes are emitting some sort of tone or frequency that are like hypnotizing or relaxing or calming the cattle down. And if there's cryptids involved, like the Sasquatch, and there were Sasquatch creatures out at Rocky Mountain Ranch as well, that are these bodyguards or workers with the ETs if they're taking the animals. Because some of these animals, like Ryan, they're dropped from above and they're found in very mysterious ways that they all can't be explained away by our military covertly mutilating animals. Like it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, and that Carl Higdon case is remarkable because I mean, here we have someone who's very familiar with the area. He's in his prime physically. I believe he was an oil driller, strong guy, and he literally has this event where, for lack of a better word, he's more or less, spacemen change his life forever, kidnap him. And these boxes are wild. Right in the Uinta Basin this month, on April 10th, there were a variety of locals who saw a few of these, and over in the West. And one saw it in the morning, one saw it in the evening, and the cameras at Space Wolf Research caught something. It's always difficult because it looks like a box, but it has like clouds around it. But yeah, this is whenever I start hearing the chupa or the box or the rectangular craft being seen, it's almost sort of like I get the chills. I get a little bit worried because these things obviously are very unlike what we would traditionally consider regularly propelled spacecraft or aircraft or anything aerospace related. They're just boxes. And in Central and South America, I mean, there's so many cases of these. They called them chupas because they would often find animals without any blood in the areas where these things were seen. And some of them were as small as refrigerators. And as you said, some of them are pretty big.
Pretty big, yeah.
What
This
do you
is
think
interesting.
might be?
This was a photograph in the Snippy archives, and it shows this strange animal print around Snippy.
Whoa.
And the first thing we thought could it be bear? Is it bear? I always want to explain things away. But talking with people that know bear prints and how deep and how heavy this print is into the ground, it's pretty unusual. And again, there was a box seen here too. It's very.
That's kind of horrific how deep that is if it's just the weight of whatever put it there.
So it makes you wonder.
Yeah, and the condition these animals are found in, it's nothing you want to be around when it goes down. It's better to get there after the fact. There, as you know. Which direction do you want to go from here? Do you want to go into more experiences at the ranch, or should we talk about Snippy in that case with everybody who investigated it?
Yeah, I think that we could do both because really what I'm going to talk about here it kind of goes back and forth because there's so many common things.
Awesome.
What I would like to talk about Ernest Wellington next from Snippy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Ernest Wellington is an interesting guy. His ranch was right next to Agnes King's ranch, where Snippy was found, and Ernest King, his ranch was known as the Dead Cow Ranch because there were so many animal deaths around there. And what's really sad and unfortunate, a week after, so he and Nellie are examining, the crime scene around Snippy. And just like in Lonnie Zamoro's case, in Socorro, there were these squatch Chico brushes that are kind of split, in half, and that was the same with the Snippy case. There's Chico brushes that are kind of squashed down, and in one of these Chico brushes, Ernest Wellington and Nellie Lewis find this strange organic tool-like thing. So Nellie picks it up with a couple sticks, and she describes it as looking like a gizzard, and she's kind of poking at the thing, and out of this weird tool gizzard type thing, and there was a tuft of the horsehair on this as well, and it was really sticky. This green ooze comes out of it. And this green ooze is seen around Snippy's, and they actually took it to the labs and tested it, so we have the lab results from that. But Nellie's hand starts burning from this, and it's burning her hands, her palms for like an hour. She has to drive back 4 miles away to their cabin, which is right at the base of Mount Blanca, and washes her hand, and eventually that burning goes away. But what's really sad is Ernest Wellington passes away a week later, and he was only in his 60s. So we don't know if that was due to him, coming in contact with this or what, but it's really, and so many of the investigators in the Snippy case had untimely deaths pretty young, in their 60s, and it's like unfortunate because we're going through ancestry. What happened to this guy? What happened to this person? What happened? Gone, and gone too soon. So
Unbelievable. That gizzard is just so horrific, the way you describe it, a biological tool.
yeah.
And this is very common. There's a number of these scenarios where people have either untimely deaths or suffer from horrific, strange health concerns or scares. There was a case in the Uinta Basin that I investigated, and I got home. I thought I was fine, and then one of my legs went numb for like 2 weeks, like I couldn't walk, and it was the leg that was closest to this mutilation. And there's a number of things, and I'm one of the ones that got away. I'm one of the lucky ones. I got off easy. I've known some other people who have worked on some of these that, like you said, there's some pretty horrific stuff that can happen. Your hair can fall out. You can get burns. It almost seems like radiation sickness sometimes. That's too bad about him passing away. And a lot of folks that are involved with cattle mutilations, they end up with health problems, right?
Right. Yeah. Even that first time filming with Beyond Skinwalker, and I'll send you the photograph in Messenger, but it didn't make the episode, but I alerted Dave Carr and the team right away. But that very first night back, we had an unexpected, we knew we were forecasted with some snow, but it was like this horrific blizzard right when the crew is filming. And in the episode, I'm actually walking them back to where I had the daytime box encounter. That didn't make the episode either because it has to kind of flow with Skinwalker Ranch, and they don't talk about the boxes on there, so it was like kind of left out. But that's where I was taking them, like, let me take you back to where I had this box encounter. And we walk over the barbed wire, and that's where we see the tracks, kind of these bipedal tracks, come out of nowhere in the snow, disappear, come back up, and then disappear again. And so it was that night. Well, the next day I had off filming, and I'm staying in Castle Rock, and my daughter comes down, and we go to have lunch at Red Robin. And we're going to go shop at the outlet stores to get some warmer clothes, because I was not prepared. And my upper shoulder started hurting me. And we go back to my room, and there's like this print. It looks like a palm, 3 fingers, and a thumb. And it's this large, I think it's a radiation burn. It was blistered. It was hot to the touch. I let the crew know right away. They documented everything. They had the med team look at it. And so that scared me a little bit because I don't know what that was. And I've had like viewers go, oh my gosh, it's something bad attached to you. And I really don't feel that's what it is. In my mind, I like to think maybe it was trying to help me up because I fell forward in the snow or something. I don't know. But I didn't lean on anything. I had several layers of clothes on. It wasn't a rash. I'll send you the pictures. And you can see it in some of my episodes on my YouTube channel as well, but that is pretty scary. And I had another medical event the second time around, so it's a place that I'm pretty cautious of now. The ex-paranormal rangers, John and Stan, they kind of gave me ways to protect myself when I'm going back to that property, because just like in the Uinta Basin, obviously in Elbert County, there's a huge Native American presence and history there as well. And I often wonder, like the old, is it on an old burial ground? I wonder about those kind of things too, because there were so many, it was a very nomadic area, but Ute and Pawnee and Cheyenne and Comanche and Cherokee and, Kiowa and all these different tribes. So I wonder how much is retained into the area there.
Yeah, it's funny how there's so many correlations, and historically, there's ties, between these two areas, and they, as you said, the indigenous cultures in the areas speak about this stuff having happened for at least 15 generations that I know of, which is a pretty long oral history of high strangeness.
Right.
So I think when you were saying what comes first, the chicken or the egg, don't get me wrong, I'm with you. I think that there is definitely some military stuff going on. Right. But, does that sort of poke the hornet's nest, poke the bear, and make things more active? or do they start to become, at odds with one another? I don't know, because it seems as if this stuff has happened for as long as we know of, and when back in 1776, when Father Escalante and Dominguez were mapping for the Spanish, they absolutely noted things in their diaries that were considered high strangeness, and these were men of faith, not somebody that's not like myself, not that I don't have faith, but they weren't attracted to the high strangeness. This was just something they observed. So it's fascinating. It's
That's true in
absolutely
the valley too, in the San Luis Valley. I mean, that is a place of such high reverence that no battles ensued there. It was a place of peace. It's sometimes referred to as the navel of the earth right there. It's interesting, and something I learned in researching the valley even deeper, that for decades, NASA has used the valley because of the rocks and things. It's very much like the lunar surface for training out there. And I'm like, oh, maybe that can count for some of the unusual lights or something that are seen out there, but certainly not all of it. And Mount Blanca, that is a mystery all of it in and of itself, where you have people finding doorways that then vanish. And there's a YouTube channel I just stumbled across. It was called like 6 Mysterious Colorado Mountains You Never Want to Go To. And the very first one was Mount Blanc. And I'm like, what are the chances I just stumbled upon this? But they talk about this couple that are out there hiking and backpacking, and they find this cave or doorway, and they go into it, and they have missing time, and they can't find the doorway again. It's a really interesting story. But even the King family, they report seeing things as if it's going right into the mountain, and as if some black hole opens and then they just vanish. And I also wonder about the Dulce Base connection. Are there tunneling through NORAD, Colorado Springs? At the Rocky Mountain Ranch, it's one of the things they reported as well, bangs and sounds underground. It wasn't the cistern. It was, we don't know what it is. We know the Titan missile silos are out in that area too. So it's interesting. These locations have a lot of things in common: high magnetic readings and water and aquifers and all this stuff. So
Yeah, I like this. Let's go there. I know that, with Lonnie, it's hard not to tie in that Dulce Base connection. And he was a stand-up guy, and this is something that, the Dulce Base is one of those topics that a lot of people won't even cover. They won't even go into the underground thing, but yeah, 100%. I think there is something to the underground stuff. What are your thoughts? Is there something pre-existing? Is it something dimensional? Is it something extraterrestrial? Or could it just be military?
I could tell you this much. So last year, after Contact in the Desert, I stopped in Pioneer Town, California, and did an interview with the widow and daughter of an I should say, he just passed away, of a CIA agent. And what's interesting is I've learned a lot about the valley in Crestone and San Luis Valley, crawling with feds. Oppenheimer, Tesla did, it's an interesting area in that regard. It's very mysterious. Why are all the feds down there? That being said, so we're doing this interview, and this also ties back to the mysterious man at Rocky Mountain Ranch who claimed to be with Air Defense Command. His name was John Duke. I don't think it's a real name. And there's so many clues in this report that speak about taking legal LSD. I don't know about you, but I don't recall a time when LSD was legal. And so in interviewing these folks for the CIA, they were talking about experiments they were doing with this FM, which stands for freaking magic. And it was a kind of a cocktail of LSD and other things. Another interesting hint in this report is that they would bring homeless people and vagrants to the ranch. I'm like, why are they doing that? And why are they experimenting with this FM? And, and my half brother at the time is living at Pueblo State Mental Institution. So we know that MK Ultra and some of these programs were using people from state hospitals in these programs. So I think there's definitely a tie into that. But getting back to the underground bases, this family that I was interviewing, they owned a lot of property at the Dulce Base. Okay. The brother found a doorway, and that's on my list to tell me where it is. I want to go try to find this thing. But When they first arrived at their many, many hundreds of acres of property on the Dulce base, they were greeted by men with guns. And they're like, we own this property. They had to prove they own this property. Like, why are there armed guards there, first of all? So absolutely yes. When I met Richard Doty years ago, the first couple questions I had for him, did you know about the Rocky Mountain Ranch? Because I think he came in as a disinformation officer in 1977. So it was right in that sweet spot of the Rocky Mountain Ranch of my childhood. And he said he was aware of it. So first of all, why are you aware of it? Why are there documented reports of people from Fort Carson on the Rocky Mountain Ranch? One of them states from Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files, it says Warren, his last name's redacted out, visits the ranch, felt something wrong, didn't want to go into the woods. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him, he would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 times. Sounds like MK Ultra stuff to me. And is it connected to the weird boxes? So it's just this crazy thing, you know?
It is. And this is a huge rabbit hole,
Yeah.
because once the military is involved in these areas of high strangeness, it as you said, it makes it very difficult to come in with your filter and try to filter out what is natural high strangeness, or should I say, more non-military, and what is actually conducive to testing. And the same is true in a number of locations. I know they were doing testing on people that were mentally ill in Missouri. They were bringing in all kinds of people in the Uinta Basin, everybody from people with PTSD to even pregnant mothers. You name it, they were on the bait list. And I think it's like that in a lot of locations where maybe they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right?
Yeah, and that's something, that I'm kind of piecing together lately, and it's a part of this whole investigative journey that I've been on for so long now that makes me angry. And I think this is why we will never see full disclosure or the full truth, because I think there's thousands of people that are unwittingly exposed to some of these whatever projects they're doing. And in my case, my half brother was an arsonist, burnt down 2 of our houses, had a lot of trauma. And I know for certain I was in elementary school, I was in these trauma programs. What's really interesting that I just recently thought made the connection, I'm a co-host on UAP Studies podcast with Jason Gilmat and Dr. Michael Glosson. And we had a guest on, and they were talking about the Gateway Project. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start listening to the Gateway tapes. And so I'm, doing the binaural beats, listening to the Gateway tapes. And it's like the 4th lesson in where they start doing your arms are heavy and relax. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my biofeedback stuff that I still have the cassette tapes for, that during my ranch years, when I got the migraine headache from the ranch, at the Denver Tech Center, Thomas H. Badinsky is his name. He invented the biofeedback system. So for a year, I went to this guy's office and I was hooked up, my head, my fingers, and I was learning to lower and raise my temperature to get a handle on my migraine headaches, which, by the way, it worked. If you have migraine headaches, do biofeedback. But I found out Thomas H. Badinsky, the grandfather of biofeedback, it later turned into the Gateway program, and he did work out of Area 51. And I'm like, was that part of what was happening on the ranch, that I was put into these, PTSD trauma things, trauma for children, and then all of a sudden I'm, in Dr. Badinsky's office doing the biofeedback program, which later turns into the Gateway program. It's really interesting. I'm like, I think that's connected now. When I put all the pieces together, it just makes sense that would be connected in that kind of way.
100%. I think you're right. I think there's a connection there, and the Monroe Institute, and figuring out that binaural stuff it's so consequential, and there's so many different examples of experiments that I've been a part of, and people around me have been a part of, where that is just like opening Pandora's box. And now with all the information, after Jake Barber, with all the information coming out about psionics, people are like, oh, wow, like what are these helmets they're wearing? What are the earphones they're wearing? what is a chair they're sitting in, and it's all part of like what you're
Right.
talking
Like,
about.
been doing that my whole life. I think it's kind of funny. And I don't like talking about that part of it either because, I've been seeing things and calling things in forever. But it's cool that they're catching on and catching up with all that. Something interesting, talking with Jeff McBurney, and I'm sure you know Jeff McBurney in Mount Wilson Ranch. And Bob Bigelow owned both Mount Wilson Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch at the same time. So I've been out there with Jeff and Nick Knack a couple times and, doing the deep dive on Howard Hughes and the runway out there and the what's buried underground. Well, he called me last week and he actually dug out this concrete, very ornate looking lamppost from underground at Mount Wilson. And on this lamppost are these symbols. And he found out in doing research as to what these symbols are. They're the face of Pan, and it's kind of an occult kind of thing, right? And with the characters that are involved with Howard Hughes, and I never knew in doing a deep dive on Howard Hughes, he's at Giant Rock, he's into UFOs, he loses his mind at the end, for many decades, and it's like, okay, what did he experience? What did he know? What did they uncover? What did they do at Mount Wilson Ranch? This is all tied into it also. And that's a whole other piece of the puzzle that is kind of scary to go diving into, but you can't avoid that. And then, the pictures from the 80s, the people that are out Mount Wilson Ranch, we have Bob Bigelow, Linda Howe, Hal Puthoff. Where's my notes? This group, the aviary group. So I had my whole wall was like trying to do a deep dive on who these people are, what they're doing, what do they know, what are they trying to do, and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, and they're still out there doing it. It's amazing. They're still out there doing it. The weird synchronicities, that lamppost is fascinating. The weird synchronicities are astounding. And I've talked to my wife about this because when we were dating, she's like, I really didn't let a whole lot out. And as time went on, she started realizing like we knew a lot of the same people. I'm actually best friends with the old CEO of Howard Hughes. My wife currently works for Howard Hughes. And she ended up, we would go to events and we'd run into people like George Knapp or Bigelow's family members. And we start, it's kind of hard not to talk about this stuff when you're like seeing it and you're just like, that you shouldn't be talking about this stuff. But when you keep finding yourself right there up against it, it's almost as if there is another intelligence involved, right? Like this hitchhiker effect. And I love Jeff and what they're doing out there. That's great
guess
stuff.
who else worked for Howard Hughes?
Oh, please tell.
Nellie Lewis.
No way. Okay. Well, there you go. It completes the circle. Fascinating. This is so cool.
When we found that out, because we found her resume, Nellie's resume, and we're like, oh,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Yeah, it's a big employer, but after a while you start to notice the connecting the dots, and as far as when you've had these times of high strangeness or these experiences, and it follows you home, how does it usually manifest to you? Is it electronics? Is it things in the yard? How do you find that manifest?
Mostly electronics and like lights. So my mom passed away in July, and I had 2 incidences. We have these outdoor lights, and just 5 of the lights. It was so bizarre. The first time it happened, I have the video. I could send it to you too. The first time, my middle son was there, and his girlfriend, and me and Tony, and we're just sitting playing guitar, having a nice night, and singing songs. And all of a sudden, the lights started doing, and I'm like, oh, is it on? Like, is it something going on? Well, nobody thought to record it or do anything like that, and I'm just having this Mom, is this you? If that's you, flash them all red. And they all went red, just the 5. It's a string of 12. Only 5 of them flashed red. And we're having this conversation. Jesse's watching this, Tony's watching this, and the girlfriend's freaking out because she's like, I've never experienced anything like this before. Well, then the following weekend, we're just watching TV, and we have the blinds there, and I thought there was maybe a lightning storm or something because I saw a change in the light. I opened the blinds, and they're doing it again. So I grab my phone really quick, and I'll send you the video. I have this conversation with my mom. Is this, I won't ask you again if this is you. Make them go red. They went red. They would flash like a white color. But then I'll have times when the big TV will just come on. I'll have pictures that fly off the wall, kind of like poltergeist kind of activity, just shadow things that I'll see. But you have to understand, I've experienced this my whole entire life since as long as I can remember. So for me, it's not a matter of, I don't care if anybody believes it or not believe whatever. I just, it's part of my experience is like being human. And if we're in a simulated universe, which might be, I kind of like that theory as well, it would answer all these questions. And in my video game, this is just my reality,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah.
kind of down to that point, but it doesn't scare me per se, but definitely like TVs. One time I do feel like it's protective. I can say that because like 2 months ago, we're getting ready. I have a bunch of books and I had a bunch stored at a friend's house 20 minutes away in Guffey. And we're getting ready to walk out the door to go get the rest of our books. The TV comes on. And normally when you turn on the TV, it's on what I call the murder channel. It's like Dateline or whatever. And so it wasn't Dateline this time. It was all the YouTube boxes and they were all about car accidents. And I'm like, what is this? And so because that had just happened, instead of driving 5 over the speed limit like I normally do, I'm driving like more cautiously doing the speed limit. And twice on my way to Guffey, somebody pulls into it would have been a head-on collision. So I feel in that instance, it was like a warning, like slow down, pay attention to the road, and it could have saved my life potentially. I don't know, but things like that happen all the time, and synchronicities that are beyond synchronicity.
That is so cool. And I do think whatever it is, and I like I like the whole simulacrum matrix theory as well. But whatever it is, I get that kind of gut feeling like you were mentioning, that sometimes it gets to know you and it's sort of just a paranormal tap on the shoulder, like you're still alive, everything's still fine, and things are still weird, right? And
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you nailed it.
that is
That's
so
exactly
cool.
right.
That
Because
is
things can get quiet for a while too, and I often try to pay attention to, and this is something in talking to so many people that have had experiences, because I love connecting dots, and that's the favorite thing that I do is just talking to other people, because then it makes you feel a little less nuts. Like, oh, good, you've heard that too, Paul. Phew, I'm so glad. But in talking with people, I've noticed that disassociation piece is so prevalent. Whether you are meditation, you're disassociating in meditation or a near-death experience or trauma or whatever. It seems to me when we disassociate from our physical bodies and tap into whatever this web is in the universe, once you make that connection, it's sort of hardwired that way. And you always have that telephone line, I guess. And sometimes it can go quiet. It's like if you're in your dark cave and you point the flashlight, whatever you're pointing the light at is what's going to expose itself. So sometimes I'll get really deep into the research and things will amp up and I'll back off again and things will slow down again. So I really think it's a matter of our attention and what we expect to see. And I noticed that years ago with the Ghost Hunters. I used to be a huge fan, still am, of the old show Ghost Hunters, and I'd always notice that like Jason and Grant would have all this experience and would have all the stuff happen because I feel like they were manifesting it. They were expecting it to happen. And then you had the ones that were more skeptical and nothing would happen. So it was like we manifest and we play a role in this as well. And maybe because of, what's happened, I learned to do that early on and that's why it continues. I don't know. But then again, it doesn't answer everything. Because this is, I have a spreadsheet of hundreds of people, and certainly not all of them have that same experience. So I don't know.
Yeah, it is something that I think it's interrelated, right? The machine, if we want to call it that, this part's not isolated from that part. It seems like if this gear starts turning the other one, even though they don't seem connected,
Right.
there's a
Spooky action.
correlation. Yeah,
Yeah.
big time. I wanted to ask you, in these areas of high strangeness, particularly the Rocky Mountain Ranch, San Luis Valley, and a number of others, we mentioned Lonnie and Dulce. I've noticed that there's other things that are sort of happening as well within the communities. Do you find that there are higher levels of, like you said, suicide and just disruptive? Yeah.
Especially, yeah, unfortunately. So, I mean, I've done some interviews with people that grew up in Elbert County that have horrific, really super sad stories. One in particular, and I won't give the names, but this kid in his late 20s comes in and we meet and have lunch, and one of his best friends when they were in high school in Elizabeth actually is in prison right now. This kid, and what's really cryptid about it is weeks before this event happened, and he stabbed his mother to death. But before that, he was getting visited by something dark. He was trying to turn to religious for help, and I mean, there was talk of UFO and ET entities and these things. Now, he could have just been maybe schizophrenic, or obviously there's mental illness there. But according to the friend, he was pretty much fine, experiencing some scary things, and just snapped. And there's unfortunately these tales of that over and over and over again. So yes, I do see that. And even talking with the Millers when they're in Beyond Skinwalker in Trinidad, and I was talking to them. I kind of wanted to talk to them again on my channel. You can see the 2 interviews. One interview focuses on the hitchhiker effect, because most times when people talk to the Millers, they're talking about the animal mutilations. But I was curious about, do they have the paranormal stuff as well? And they do. They had a butcher knife fly across their kitchen, and they hear the disembodied voices, and they have the hitchhiker effect just like most of us do. And what's interesting about that is I was asking them, because it's a huge training site down there in that part of Colorado, the military. And I was like, well, are there ranches that don't get hit? Like with John Malone, who owns most of the land in the country, he has a lot of cattle on some of his ranches, and his cattle never get touched. And I'm like, why certain ranches are getting targeted and why others are being left alone? And they felt, the Millers, that the mutilations are almost just as attracted to the people that live in the ranches. A lot of times have an Irish descent for whatever weird reason, or military background, as they do the cattle. So and I hadn't heard that before, and I'm like, that's really interesting. But they've noticed that it seems to target certain individuals.
Sure. Getting back to the Fey folk and the leprechauns and all of this
Right.
goodness from the old country.
Have you noticed that too? Like when
Yeah.
I meet somebody, I'm like, you're Irish? Okay, tell me what's happened to you.
Bloodlines, I swear, it gets interesting. It's if we really are just salt batteries walking around in these meat suits, it's strange where we get our DNA from, and if this stuff follows you into the next page or the next generation. And something really interesting, I think, is what you just mentioned. I recently went to the Uinta Basin to research a full-blown dogman, werewolf, skinwalker-like sighting that a woman had who had grown up right there in Fort Duchesne. And where she saw this was close to what would be considered a crossroads. And where it ran off to was a home that has since been removed, but had one of these scenarios like you're mentioning, where family members unaliving other family members and then lighting the house on fire, and then the house later on getting removed and the land being rebought. But the bottom line is it didn't happen all that long ago. And I'm wondering, when it comes, I get mesmerized when you start to see the correlations with like the esoteric and the occult in these locations. Have you found any types of like witchcraft or other strange things in the area?
You'd have to ask me that, wouldn't you? So when we were first filming, and my first time back for Beyond Skinwalker, I had not met the people that have lived there for the past 30 plus some years. So they're the family that bought it from the family of my childhood. And so I come, loaded with, all this research, because I didn't know if they knew anything about the property. And right before COVID hit, I had left a message in their box, a little note explaining who I was, that I wanted to meet for lunch so I can tell them all this horrifying stuff about where they live. Which, I don't, that's their home, right? And then COVID hit and shut us down. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call from Beyond Skinwalker. that they're going to do this. They don't want us to meet. They want to roll cameras the first time when we meet. So when you see that, that's legitimate. We're meeting for the first time. But
Cool.
what they don't show is like 2 hours we're sitting in their big barn garage, and I'm going over my, everything, and they pulled out all the original pictures. Okay, so here they are. They have cameras rolling, and I'm learning that when they bought the house, and I see the pictures of how I remembered it, because they built an addition out to the left and to the right and to the front and put different siding. So my brain knew the house was in the same location, but it looked different. Okay, so I'm seeing pictures of how I remembered it from when I was little. And they said when they bought the property, it had sat vacant for a few years because the family just abandoned it. And there were satanic stickers in every window. And then in the back of the ranch house was a cradle and like carvings in the trees, in the woods. And I'm having cameras rolling. I'm having these weird flashback memories. And I'm like, cut, like, I don't want this on film. And to their credit, later they took me aside and they're like, look, we just want you to know, we know this is very personal, and History Channel won't touch this stuff. They don't like going down that road. And I'm like, thank goodness. And in even researching, it wasn't my mom's boyfriend or my mom. My mom's boyfriend later became a Aurora police officer. He drove a Vespa with a briefcase, had the pen pocket protectors, and I'm like, it wasn't. But the mom and the strange guy, John Duke, that had all the crazy tales of talking to ETs and doing the legal LSD and was part of Air Defense Command. I don't know if this guy is just a nut job, a compulsive liar, or if he was really in a program, or who this guy really was. But in some of their correspondence with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, there were some symbolism that made me question, like, what were they into? So if that was going on there, it came from them, not my mom and the dad. So,
Yeah.
and I honestly think it's all from this John Duke, because if you read, the little bit that we have on him, he's the one that's bringing vagrants and homeless people and claims to be part of all these weird projects. And I'm like, who was this guy really? He claims to have come from San Francisco in the late 60s, early 70s, which we know this is MK Ultra headquarters. So makes me wonder. But yeah, there is that at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. That
Oh,
being
man.
said, it's the whole area again. So is the whole area like kind of got the occult going on? I don't know.
Right. You're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. My goodness. Okay, so
Yeah.
as we kind of start to wrap up, let's tell people again about your podcast, where they can follow you there, your book, where they can purchase it, and anything else you have going on.
Yeah, you could see me again at Contact in the Desert next month. You could go to contactinthedesert.com and learn about that. You can go to Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige on YouTube. And please like, share, and subscribe. I'm a new channel, so that's always very helpful. And I try to get content out. I'm actually going to be putting one out, a new episode from the Snippy site that we just got back from last weekend. And again, be on the lookout for the new Snippy book. And one other thing I'd just like to throw in at the very end, and I can throw a couple little teasers here, back to the name. But there were 4 horses that were pastured on the King Ranch. And this is so cool because this is kind of new information from the Opera Files. But there was a black horse named Smokey who died the week before Snippy. And in the report, Smokey died from a rattlesnake bite in the hip, but he was 14 hands high and 1,200 pounds. And doing research on a rattlesnake bite in a horse that large, it would have to get him right in the throat to take down a horse that large. So here we lose Smokey the week before Snippy. So that leaves 3 remaining horses on the pasture. We have Lady, the dapple gray. We have Sheba, which is a brown horse. These 2 horses were saddled. Snippy was never saddled. Snippy was just taught to halt and lead, and Snippy was going to be saddled the week before. So in the Apro files are pictures post Snippy's death of Lady and Sheba, and before Snippy's mutilation, they were very friendly, would take sugar cubes. That circle up there is a potential UFO in the picture, by the way. There's a couple interesting things here. But look at this right here. This picture right here. It says...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'll read you the caption because it's really cool. It says, Lady, Snippy's mother, These two horses, Sheba and Lady, were the horses that were with Snippy in the pasture when killed, only witnesses to Snippy's murder. So to have these old historical photos and to see this is just phenomenal. So again, this will be available in a couple weeks, May 20th on Amazon. And come see me at Contact, and please check out the YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. Wow. I mean, unbelievable. Great stuff. And thanks so much for coming on and taking time out of your busy day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. What an epic conversation. I wish I would have scheduled her for 2 or 3 hours. We probably could have filled 4 hours with all the places I wanted to go. And yeah, I think my gut feeling was right. Lots of synchronicities between that ranch in Colorado, obviously Space Wolf Research, the Uinta Basin, the old Bigelow Ranch, and a number of other locations. I'm glad she brought up some of the paranormal rangers like John and Stan, because the Four Corners and, you know, a lot of these places have very strange synchronicities that are similar. And I wish we could have gone more into Lonnie. I'll have to have her back on the podcast. Thanks so much for listening in. And if you haven't gone over to heroparanormal.com, check it out. Buy yourself some swag. Smash the subscribe button. If you're listening via YouTube, Rumble, or Spotify, like, share, and subscribe. And have a very blessed evening. Keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Esoteric Research Organization. Hero Paranormal always setting up the pace, man. Crop circle tipping, Illuminati still tripping. Making those ears perk up, gonna make you question your earth. You better. Mystery bloodlines and secret society. Creepy shapeshifter says, come sit beside me. Yeah, cozy on up. What's with all this spiral, acting like UFOs? Say what? So we put Space Wolf, tiptoe through the dark, third eye blinding, tune in and blast off, blast off. Blast off, baby. Blast off.